Thank you, Victoria. How many of us are wondering how the natural world and humanity itself will be by the time the younger end of our Lions family will have reached the ages of the more senior? One of the biggest causes of deforestation has been to produce food. Vice District Governor Chris Hibbert told in his presentation about gleaning and how much produce is wasted by unharvested food, and how better food management helps the hungry as well as making better use of the land. Lions are also famous for recycling spectacles. Around the world, thousands can see because of lions. One of the expanding issues impacting on our environment is clothing production. Here are some statistics from the World Economic Forum. Clothing production has roughly doubled since 2000. While people bought 60% more garments in 2014 than in 2000, they only kept the clothes for half as long. In Europe, fashion companies went from an average offering of 2 collections per year in 2000 to 5 in 2011. Some brands offer even more. Zara puts out 24 collections per year, while H&M offers between 12 and 16. Then a lot of this clothing ends up in landfill. The equivalent of one rubbish truck full of clothes is burned or dumped in a landfill every second. Many cheap fashion clothes are produced in countries where there is a shortage of water, but making clothing takes a large volume of water, and it also pollutes it pretty badly. Anyone who's worked in a charity shop will have come across clothes being donated with the shop label still attached, never having been worn. Our next presenter is Lion Teresa Carberry, who's going to tell us about how she is doing her bit to combat this waste. Teresa.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Teresa Carberry, and I'm very happy to be part of this environment component of our service roadshow. I'm going to be talking about uniform recycling, and I'm representing the Burt Mason Internet Lions Club, a club in North Wales. You might be asking why I started this project. Well, it's actually personal. During the first year of the COVID pandemic, I became mayor of the town. But I was a mayor that needed a shield, so it wasn't going to be possible for me to do things in the way that you might expect. I had several online meetings with various groups, and it quickly became apparent to me that one of the issues raised was that they were finding it difficult, my community were finding it difficult to clothe their children. So I began to look around to see if there was something, a clothing bank for children. And indeed I found one in Chester. Now at that time, this clothes bank actually provided a full range of clothing for those from birth to 5 years of age. But since then, they've actually moved on, and now they provide clothing for 0 to 12-year-olds. And I think we can all understand the reasons for that. But one area that they didn't cover, and which the people in my community wanted, was to have school uniform. Now, sometimes this was because they couldn't get out to get the uniform, but it was also because some of them had lost their jobs or were on the furlough scheme and money was very tight. Now, it just seemed a natural conclusion to me that this was an area that I could take on because I could actually do this from home. I'm also a member of 2 charities, if you like, or organisations within my town that looks at reducing waste, trying to go a bit more green. So I thought, yes, I can do this. I can do this project from home, even though I'm myself shielding. Now, you'll be happy to know that I'm not going to read all my slides out to you, but the slide before you shows you the situation as it stands in Wales. I'm afraid I cannot comment on the situation for the rest of the UK. you will see that certain learners are eligible for a grant for their school uniforms. However, if you've had a child, you know that that child grows. They have growth spurts, and before you know it, they need new trousers, new shirts, and new shoes. And they can all be expensive items, because often school uniform comes with a logo, and there might be a shop in your area that has the monopoly on selling that uniform at a premium price, which is rather unfortunate when you consider that to completely kit out a child is probably about £300. And at this point in time, and even at that point in time, people don't have a spare £300. I've already mentioned to you all that I was shielding. So the one thing that I had an abundance of was my own time. So I decided that I would put out notices and collect uniform that was in good condition. And I asked for all the items that you can see here. Now I have to say, originally my thought was not to ask for shoes, because when I was growing up, my mum might have put me into second-hand clothes, but she would never have put me into second-hand shoes, no matter how good they were. But a friend of mine convinced me that there was a need, and actually it was true. I cannot believe how many pairs of shoes I collected that were in good order and that instantly were taken up by other parents for their children. You can see there's quite an extensive range of things that I collected there. And it was the community. The community brought me the items. This slide shows the points that I think you'll need to consider if you decide to do a project like this. Now, I've already mentioned that I was collecting for 5 schools within my town, and each of the uniforms was unique to that school. As a teacher and the mayor at that time, I had email access to each school, and this enabled me to contact not only the school, but therefore the parents and the carers. As mayor, I could make full use of the press, and of course I used social media, both Twitter and Facebook. I decided to collect the full range of school uniform, even PE kit, because I'm not sure whether you know, but a pair of football socks for a school can cost as much as £20. Contact with the schools meant I was given the precise details of each school's uniform and the expectations regarding that uniform. I made a conscious decision not to charge for any of the items that might be taken, but any voluntary donations given were ploughed back into the community, and I decided that it would be best to buy school stationery and pencil cases for Year 6 students, because that would equip them to move on to secondary school with a full set of maths equipment. And I have to own up to being a maths teacher. I did look to see if similar projects were being run, and at that time the answer was no. I've already mentioned that there was a similar project in terms of clothing for children 0 to 5 years, but not a uniform project. I was fortunate to have good links with the local community centre, and they agreed to become a collection point from which I could then go and collect the items and still remain safe, because of course I was shielding. A big consideration for a project like this is storage in a clean, dry place, but I'll talk more about that later. A good source of uniform is of course the school's unclaimed lost property box, and it seemed to me that the schools were only too happy to pass the clothing on to me. PTA and school newsletters are an invaluable tool to promoting the scheme and getting the word out, accompanied of course by social media in all its forms. My particular collection point was in the town centre. It was easily accessible and known to everybody in my community, so I knew that I would be able to easily collect the uniform. So, the next step, once I managed to collect all the uniform, was to process it, discarding unsuitable items with broken zips, indelible stains, or simply too worn. But these were put to one side and bagged. I then took them to a local charity shop who sold them on as rags, so they also got the benefit of the scheme. The good condition, gently worn items were washed, ironed and sized. My days were full, but it could all be managed by me at home shielding. So just think what a whole club could do. The last point on the slide is useful, but as yet I have still to complete a spreadsheet to accomplish this. Stock control will help fasten the response to requests for given items. But the main thing to keep in your mind is that the clothing should always retain the dignity to the child that wears it. And this is one of the reasons that I started the scheme. I could not believe how generous the community proved to be and how great the need was for school uniform. Parents and carers actually contacted me in various ways, and my neighbours got used to bags of clothing being left outside my hall door for people to come and collect. Once things improved a little, I took on a stall at the local market. Now, this runs twice a week, and I would name the day that I was going to hold the stall and give the date, and people knew in advance and would just turn up, collect items, and occasionally leave me a donation. I had help from my own Lions Club, but I also had help from other Lions Clubs that were close to my own. The community embraced the stall and the items and the idea, and many who used it have now become my friends and know more about lions and recycling. Because of the timing of this project, there was one constant theme throughout the whole thing: keeping everybody safe, keeping myself safe, and keeping the community safe. And that was paramount. We followed all the guidelines from the Welsh Government, and we also did a risk assessment. Now, you know that with any project that you do with lions or any event, there needs to be a risk assessment. So please don't forget that aspect. The impact of the project had rippling effects upon the community and actually some long-lasting consequences. A local shop donated me stationery and I was able to distribute that to school children. Some of the monies raised were put to local causes and charities such as the food bank and a community fridge. And the link with the children's charity that you see here, the one I've previously mentioned but not named, provided me with brand new uniform with the label still on. It was donated to them, but at that point they didn't provide such items. It also enabled me to provide much needed items for members in the community who had newborns, and such items such as baby baths, blankets, Moses baskets, and of course I was able to provide things for local refugee families. There can be no doubt in my mind that I was actually best served by my position as mayor, my extensive social media presence, and this of course was combined with the gift of being able to call upon my fellow Lions to help me. On this slide you can see some of the local press releases and messages that I received, and I have to tell you that I'm now known in my town as the Uniform Lady. There were lots of positives to this project: saving good clothing going to landfill, raising funds for charities, local and national, providing a need and one less financial worry for parents, and of course, dignity for students. I actually Googled the positives of uniform recycling. Lo and behold, there's my picture. Imagine the PR a Lions Club might obtain with such a project. And just to prove a point, further down that same page that I Googled, here I am again. Now there's lots and lots of information out there that's freely accessible with regard to doing a uniform recycling scheme. It's not always the case that schools themselves will do the recycling. There's a little bit of a stigma about parents coming into the school and being seen collecting the items. But because I pushed my project as a green project, an environmental project, something where they were helping, the planet, if you like, then there was no stigma attached to them coming to my stall, and people have come back time and time again. So now we come to the end of my presentation. This project or scheme is easy for a whole club to manage. Admittedly, the cost of washing, ironing and tumble drying may now be a greater cause for concern, but isn't fundraising part of what we do? We have the people power, we have the expertise, and we have the will to serve our communities. When I started this, I was alone, a single project. After 1 year, there were 7 similar groups in my county, following the model that I had started. I'm currently working with the County Council to see if premises may be found to store the items, because, to be quite frank, it became impossible to do so in my house. I had a shortage of space. The stats presented here on this slide provide a measure of the need for more recycling of clothes. My advice is to do this as a green project rather than a charitable one. People will come. There is a need. And remember, where there's a need, there's a lion. So, all that remains now is for me to say thank you. A big thank you for allowing me to be part of this event. I hope that you've enjoyed what I've said and what you've seen. And I'm sure you'll all agree that a Lions Club can take this on and make a difference to their community.